Well, hello there. Let's talk about Canada. Yes, Canada. That vast expanse of politeness, maple syrup, and an uncanny ability to apologize for things that aren't even their fault. But it seems even the nicest folks have their limits, especially when faced with the recurring international drama that is, you guessed it, trade tariffs. And who, you might ask, is often found near the epicenter of such tariff-related tempests. If you said a certain former US president with a penchant for bold pronouncements and even bolder hair, you'd be absolutely astonishingly correct. It seems the mere threat of new American tariffs has stirred the Canadian spirit, specifically in the beautiful province of British Columbia. You see, British Columbia, or BC as the cool kids call it, has decided it's not just going to sit there and take it. Oh no, they've decided to play a little hardball themselves. Their target? US commercial trucks, the very lifeblood of goods trundling their way up to Alaska. Imagine the scene, a peaceful convoy of American big rigs, dreaming of delivering fresh lettuce and vital supplies, suddenly finding a Canadian toll booth where none existed before. It's like finding a surprise beaver in your bathtub, startling, a bit inconvenient, and definitely a statement. So how does a province go about preparing for a potential trade war? Do they stockpile extra hockey pucks and double-double coffees? Well, perhaps. But more practically, they pass legislation. In this case, British Columbia introduced something rather pointedly named the Economic Stabilization Tariff Response Act. You have to appreciate the directness. It's not called the Let's All Be Friends and Share Timbits Act. No, this is serious business. A legislative tool designed to give BC the power to act swiftly if or when those threatened US tariffs materialize. This act, introduced in the BC Legislative Assembly in Victoria by Deputy Premier Nikki Sharma, is quite clever in its design. It doesn't immediately slap tolls on every unsuspecting American truck driver the moment it's passed. That would be a bit, shall we say, impolite, even in these circumstances. Instead, it enables the government to impose such tolls if they deem it necessary. Think of it as loading the slingshot but waiting to see if Goliath actually starts throwing rocks. The primary purpose of this legislation is, quite simply, to give British Columbia a bargaining chip, a way to push back against what its premier sees as unfair economic pressure from the United States. Now, let's talk about the man at the forefront of this Canadian counter-offensive British Columbia Premier, David Eby. Mr. Eby has not been shy about expressing his views on the situation, and particularly on former President Trump's tariff threats. He hasn't just called them unhelpful or a bit bothersome. Oh no, Premier Eby has described Trump's rhetoric as an unprecedented threat and, get this, an economic war against Canada. Those are strong words, the kind you don't usually associate with the land of sorry. It's clear that BC's leadership feels pushed into a corner and is ready to push back firmly. Premier Eby has gone even further, making some rather startling accusations. He suggested that Mr. Trump essentially wants to annex Canada and turn it into the 51st US state. Now, whether that's a literal interpretation or a dramatic flourish to highlight the perceived aggression, it certainly paints a vivid picture of how seriously BC is taking these threats. Eby's stance is that this legislation, the Economic Stabilization Tariff Response Act, is a crucial part of a broader strategy. Alright, so British Columbia is drawing a line in the sand, or perhaps more accurately on the Alaska Highway. But what does this mean for the folks up in Alaska? Well, to put it mildly, they're not exactly thrilled. Alaska, as you might know, is a bit geographically unique. It's part of the United States, but it's not physically connected to the lower 48 states. A huge chunk of its supplies, especially fresh produce and other essential goods, arrives by truck. And those trucks have to drive through Canada, specifically through British Columbia. Currently they do this duty-free. Imagine that changing. Suddenly, your morning orange juice starts tasting a bit like international diplomacy. Alaska Governor Mike Dunleavy, for one, has expressed a rather diplomatic hope that the big kids, the federal governments of the United States and Canada, can sort out their tariff squabbles without provincial and state governments resorting to unilateral decisions. It's the classic, can't we all just get along, plea, but with the added urgency of potentially skyrocketing prices for everything from apples to Ziploc bags in Anchorage. It turns out British Columbia isn't the only part of Canada feeling a bit feisty in the face of potential United States tariffs. While Premier Eby was busy drafting his toll booth manifestos, Other Canadian leaders were also rummaging through their own toolkits of economic retaliation. It's like a nationwide game of what can do to show we're serious. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau himself announced retaliatory tariffs in response to United States actions in the past, always emphasizing that the ultimate goal is to get rid of all tariffs. But in the meantime, if you poke the Canadian bear, you might just get a coordinated multi-provincial pokeback. Consider Ontario, Canada's most populous province. Its premier, Doug Ford, decided to get in on the action by introducing a 25% surcharge on electricity bound for the United States. That's right, if you're in certain parts of America and you flip a light switch, you might just be contributing a little extra to Ontario's provincial coffers, all thanks to trade disputes. This shows a willingness across different regions of Canada to use whatever leverage they have, be it highways or hydro. Then we have the Yukon, British Columbia's northern neighbor, also feeling the pinch in the principle. Just when you thought this cross-border squabble was all about trucks and tariffs, another major industry sailed into view: cruise ships. Those giant floating cities ferry tourists up the scenic coast to Alaska. They might become a key pawn in this economic chess game. Senator Dan Sullivan from Alaska threatened economic retaliation. He suggested waiving the Passenger Vessel Services Act, which requires foreign-registered cruise ships to stop in Canada. If waived, ships could sail directly from Seattle to Alaska, bypassing British Columbia ports like Vancouver or Victoria. This would be a massive economic blow to the province. So, where does all this leave us? As of early June 2025, British Columbia's Economic Stabilization Tariff Response Act is likely making its way through the legislative process. The tolls aren't necessarily active yet, it's enabling legislation. The future hinges on whether those threatened United States tariffs on Canadian goods materialize. It's a waiting game, but a very tense one. This tit-for-tat escalation doesn't foster warm feelings between neighbors. Episodes like this reveal underlying tensions and a willingness to protect interests.